Hey, what's up guys, Jaeky here. Today we're going to be checking out the Zowie XL2586X Plus. This is their flagship monitor that recently just came out. It is a 1080p TN 600Hz monitor. Huge shout out to Zowie for setting this out for review, but as always, that will not affect my opinion of it. So this is the successor to the XL2586X, and pretty much the only difference between the two monitors is the refresh rate, going up from 540Hz to 600Hz. Everything else about this monitor is the same. The colors, stand, and everything else is identical. The only difference between these two is going to be that extra 60Hz bump from 540 to 600. So as you guys know, I have been using my OLED 360Hz monitor for a while now, and I made a video going over that as well, which I will leave in the description below if you're curious. But in this video, I'm basically just going to be going over my experience using OLED compared to this 600Hz Zowie monitor. But real quick, let's go over the unboxing experience here. I think Zowie does their packaging for their monitors extremely well. As you can see here, it comes with everything you need: a power cable, DisplayPort cable, HDMI cable, as well as the base for the monitor stand, the actual stand itself, and of course the monitor. You also get these flaps that you can install on the side of the monitor to sort of block out the peripheral vision. You're probably going to be using these flaps mostly in a LAN environment to block out the peripheral vision to help you lock in easier. This Zowie monitor also comes with their S switch, which I really like. The S switch basically just lets you operate the on-screen display, but it also lets you save profiles, so you can save up to 3 different profiles on this S switch with different saturation settings and whatnot. So I actually use this a lot, one for my desktop and then one for my in-game. So that's one thing I really like about the latest Zowie monitors, is that they have this little S switch. The new Zowie monitor stands are also great ergonomically. The height and tilt adjustment are really nice, and the stand feels extremely high quality. When you're changing the height on the monitor, it's very smooth. One thing you can't do on this new Zowie stand is actually go portrait mode. So if you're someone who likes to use your monitor in portrait mode for whatever reason, you actually can't swivel it portrait. You can only keep this monitor in landscape mode. So that is something to keep in mind if you like using your monitor in portrait mode. And yeah, in Zowie fashion, you do have markings on the monitor base as well as the height adjustment with notches so that you know how high your monitor is, so that you can recreate that setting every time. This is great for if you're bringing your monitor around to LAN tournaments and you want the exact same tilt and height adjustment. You can just keep these numbers written down and you can get your monitor to the exact same setup every time. On the back of the monitor, there's also a headphone hanger as well as a little groove that you can use to lift the monitor. So obviously the whole design of the monitor is very focused towards esports and being very portable for LAN tournaments so that you can bring this monitor around with you. You can see that the monitor design has very thick bezels, and this is apparently on purpose so that it's easier for you to focus on your game, according to Zowie. But yeah, definitely very different, especially when you consider that most modern monitors nowadays are going more towards a bezel-less design. The Zowie monitor here has these very thick bezels, so completely opposite. And of course, this monitor is a 1080p 24-inch monitor. It is a TN panel, of course. That is how we are getting these 600Hz refresh rates. The connections here are DisplayPort 1.4 and HDMI 2.1. So I'm not going to go over the super technical specs of this monitor. There's tons of reviews on YouTube and the internet in general if you want those really technical specs. I'm just going to be going over my experience using OLED versus the 600Hz TN panel. Let me start off by saying that the Zowie XL2586X is retailing for $1,000 USD. Whereas I bought my 360Hz QD OLED Alienware AW2725DF for around $630 USD. So that's about a $300 to $400 difference in price. A fantastic video that I highly recommend you guys watch is this video right here by Monitors Unboxed. The 540Hz LCD versus 360Hz and 480Hz OLED is fast LCD clearer. Now, while I'm using a 600Hz LCD rather than the 540Hz, the results here still stand, so I highly recommend checking out this video. I will leave it in the description below, and I'll also be referencing screenshots from this video in my video. So when we talk about great performance, OLED monitors come out on top because the response time is basically instant, meaning that you're not going to get any inverse ghosting with OLED. And the main selling point of the Zowie 1080p 600Hz panel is going to be their Diac 2 strobing. So currently, as it stands, the motion clarity on the 540Hz and 600Hz TN panels is better than OLED. because of that strobing. So if you look at the Blur Busters UFO test with the 540Hz with Diac 2 enabled compared to a 360Hz OLED, the motion clarity on the strobed TN panel is going to be better than the motion clarity on an OLED. So obviously, if you're buying the Zowie monitor, you are going to want to use Diac because that is the whole selling point of this monitor is the strobing technology, which gives it extremely clear motion clarity. Now, the one thing I will say is that even though the Zowie has extremely good motion clarity, there's still a little bit of that inverse ghosting just because the response times on the TN panel aren't instant like they are on the OLED. So while the OLED motion clarity is not as clear as a strobed TN panel, you are going to have no inverse ghosting on the OLED due to those instant gray to gray response times. And that is only compared to a 360Hz OLED. There are 480Hz OLEDs on the market right now, and there is a 500Hz OLED coming out sometime this year as well. And the motion clarity on those higher refresh rate OLEDs are going to be even better than the motion clarity on the 360Hz OLEDs. Plus, the added benefit of the instant response times and no inverse ghosting is something to keep in mind as well for the OLED. Obviously, when it comes to color reproduction, color accuracy, and viewing angles, the OLED is going to be far superior than the TN panel. And the fact that the OLED is 1440p resolution compared to the 1080p Zowie panel just makes the OLED better for pretty much anything outside of competitive gaming. I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and the difference in quality between the 1440p OLED and the Zowie 1080p TN is extremely drastic. I feel like I've been extremely spoiled by the image quality of OLED because every time I look at OLED, it is just eye candy, and games and content really just pop out on this monitor. It's really hard to describe unless you've seen it in person, but OLED with the super vibrant colors and the infinite contrast ratio just looks incredible. And I'm gonna be honest, when I switched over to the 1080p Zowie panel, it was actually pretty shocking how bad everything looked. Even though I'm used to the look of 1080p TN since I used my 240Hz Zowie for literally like 6+ years, just switching to OLED and using that for a couple months and then trying to switch back to 1080p TN has been extremely hard for me. So let's go over some pros and cons of the XL2586X Plus over OLED. First is going to be the form factor. Some people just prefer 24 inches for competitive gaming. So if you're someone who mainly plays Counter-Strike, Valorant, Overwatch, some people just prefer 24 inches. For me, this isn't really an issue. At first, it was a little bit jarring switching to a 27-inch OLED monitor, but really you can just push the monitor back a little bit on your table and you're getting pretty much the same experience. When I'm using the Zowie monitor, I have to move it a little bit closer to my face just because it's smaller, and if I'm using a 27-inch monitor, I just push it a little bit further back. The second reason why you might want to choose the Zowie monitor instead is just because you want to play on 1080p. One thing that I do miss about 1080p is the way crosshairs look in Valorant. Crosshairs will look different from 1080p to 1440p just because the pixel count is different. So on 1440p, your crosshairs will look smaller because there's just more pixels. Obviously, if you're playing at 1080p, you're going to get more FPS, which is definitely needed if you're running 600 Hz. You want to try to hit 600 FPS to utilize this monitor fully. And that's another thing, is that if you want to get the most out of this 600 Hz monitor, you're going to need a top of the line PC. So you're going to need something like a 9800X 3D to render out all those frames. Even if you're playing something that's not very demanding, like, you know, a competitive shooter, which is pretty much the only games that are going to be able to utilize the 600 Hz. So CS, Valorant, maybe Overwatch. Even on those games, you're going to need a pretty beefy CPU like the 9800X 3D to consistently push out 600 plus FPS. And in most cases, you're not even going to be hitting that consistently. So let's talk about how 600 Hz actually looks and feels. So when I first took it out of the box and I plugged it in, it's definitely extremely smooth. Like, I do notice that it is a lot smoother than 360 Hz. On the desktop, even just moving my mouse around, I could feel the difference. And playing in game, I could definitely feel that it was smoother. But the question is, did it make me play better? Not really. Honestly, 360 Hz in my opinion is enough to play at the highest level. I am top 500 Radiant in Valorant, and I really don't feel like dropping from 600 Hz down to 360 Hz would hinder my performance in any way. So let's talk about the cons of the XL2586X Plus when compared to OLED. First is going to be the price. So if you guys remember a while ago, I did actually pick up the 540 Hz monitor for a bit just to try out, and I purchased that using my own money. But I ended up returning the 540 Hz monitor after a couple of weeks. And the main reason is I couldn't stomach spending $1,000 USD on a 1080p TN panel in 2025. I think this price point for this monitor is absolutely ridiculous, especially when you can get a 1440p OLED monitor for around $600 to $700 USD. It just doesn't make sense to me that a 1080p TN panel is priced at $1,000 USD, even if it is on the cutting edge at 600 Hz. It just doesn't make sense to me. In my opinion, I think the only people that should be even considering buying this monitor is like 0.1% of consumers. If you are a tier 1 professional player and you make money playing the game, so if you are a pro Valorant player, or you're a pro CS player, or you're just a pro tier 1 competitive shooter player that makes money playing this game, that is the only audience that I would recommend this monitor to. If you use your computer for anything else, such as playing single player story games, consuming content, creating content, you know, just browsing YouTube, watching anime, watching TV shows, whatever the case might be, you are better off spending that money on an OLED monitor, 1440p, or even going for a 4K monitor. But if you're looking to spend $1,000 USD, unless you are a pro player, I really just can't recommend it. Another issue I've had with the XL2586X Plus that I also saw on the XL2586 540 Hz is the white uniformity. I don't even know if that's what it's called, but basically the entire monitor is not completely lit up evenly. So in this video I took here, it's kind of hard to see on camera, but the edges of the monitor is darker than the center of the monitor. And I'm not sure if this is on purpose, but it's definitely not a faulty unit, because with my 540 Hz I had this as well. This is one of the first things I noticed actually. And then on the 600 Hz, I see this as well. And basically it's like sort of a vignette around your monitor where the edges are dark and then the center is white as it should be. And I'm not sure if Zowie does this on purpose so that it's like easier to lock into the center of your screen, but I find it extremely distracting, especially for just browsing the web. If you want to look at the corner of your screen, it's like slightly darker. Even in game, when I'm looking at the top left of my screen to look at my mini map to get information, the top left of my screen is just darker than the center of my screen, and it makes it a lot harder to get information from my mini map than if I was using my OLED monitor. On my OLED monitor, the entire screen is lit up completely uniform, but for some reason on the Zowie monitor, the edges of the screen is darker than the center, and I'm not sure if this is a panel issue or if it's something that Zowie deliberately tuned into the monitor to help you focus on the center. I'm really not sure, but that is one thing that I wanted to bring up that I noticed. Okay, so quick pause. As I was editing this video, I actually noticed a little bit of something on my screen, a little dead pixel right here. And I couldn't believe my eyes at first. I was like, there's no way, because I've literally had this monitor for less than a week now. Like, it literally has not even been a full week, and I'm seeing this little dead pixel. So I wanted to make sure, so I pulled up a little dead pixel checking website that just has different colors. And there it is. There's a little dead pixel on my screen. It takes me a little bit to focus the camera here, but there's a little dead pixel right there on my screen. You can see it very clearly on the white and the green as well. So yeah, very disappointing, especially considering that this is a $1,000 monitor and I've had it for less than a week. It already has a dead pixel. Not only that, but this doesn't seem to be just an isolated issue. I searched Reddit and it turns out that this panel specifically, like, not on the Plus version, but even just on the X version, the 540 Hz, a lot of people have been getting this dead pixel issue. So as you can see, there's a lot of Reddit posts that just talk about having dead pixels with this monitor. The quality control should definitely be better than this. And the fact that I'm able to find so many different Reddit threads with this dead pixel issue kind of goes to show that it is more prevalent than it should be. Obviously, if you bought this monitor, you can always exchange it, RMA it, but just the fact that so many people have to go through that process in the first place is a little bit disappointing to see. So yeah, guys, overall, my closing thoughts is this monitor is definitely leading in terms of motion clarity. The 600 Hz Zowie monitor is currently at the top when it comes to motion clarity. So if you're a pro player and you're just looking for pure motion clarity performance, then yeah, you can consider this monitor. But if you're literally anybody else, I just can't recommend the Zowie 600Hz monitor, especially when OLED is on the market. OLED, you're not going to get any inverse ghosting, you have instant gray to gray response times, and in terms of motion clarity, you can go for the 480Hz or the 500Hz OLED that's coming out soon, and you're going to get pretty close to strobed TN panel motion clarity on an OLED, which has better resolution, better color accuracy, better viewing angles, better brightness uniformity. So yeah, for me personally, I will be switching back to my OLED. I just cannot use a 1080p TN panel after using OLED for so long and just getting used to the quality of the OLED. But that's pretty much it, guys. I hope this video helps you guys out and was informative. And if you liked it, make sure you leave a comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.